Nothing good ever happens when you're somewhere you aren't supposed to be. It wasn't my fault. I was sitting at the stoplight and a guy pulled up next to me. He motioned for me to roll down my window. "You've got a low tire," he said. I told him thanks and pulled into the Walmart parking lot off to the right. I got out and looked. I could see a screw head embedded in the tire tread and air was slowly leaking out. Great. Now what? I decided to go in and get a can of that slime stuff. When I came back, I took the screw out. Big mistake. Now the air really started hissing out. I screwed it back in and got some air at the gas station in the parking lot. I was only 15 miles from home and I'd check it several times. If it started getting too low, I'd put in the can of slime. There was a convenience store about 5 miles from home and I could see the tire was getting pretty low in the driver's side mirror. I pulled in and they didn't have air. Time to test the slime. I put it in and some green goo, I guess they call it slime for a reason, came out but the hissing of escaping air stopped. I was just about to get back in my car when I noticed a pickup truck pull in. It was one of those giant ones with the huge tires. It sat up so high that you'd need a ladder to get in. I recognized the truck from somewhere. The door opened and a tall blonde guy got out. He had on cowboy boots and a huge belt buckle. I chuckled a bit, but that died about halfway out. The passenger door opened and a beautiful raven-haired woman hopped down. I definitely recognized her. It was Rachel, the woman I'd been married to for the last 18 years. What the hell? I was parked over to the side and they never even noticed my car. It was the company car, one of those little box-shaped imports and not very noticeable, I guess. They were holding hands as they went into the store and she was laughing up into his face. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. All I could do was stand there like a fool. Now I remembered where I'd seen the guy before. He worked at the same company Rachel did. She was the office manager for a mental health clinic and he was one of the caseworkers. I'd seen the truck at their building. The question was, what was Rachel doing with him? I couldn't think of his name. Finally, it came to me, Jerry Garner. The question was, why wasn't Rachel at work? I was going to find out. I got back in the car and waited. He helped her in when they came out of the store, carrying cups of coffee. They'd ward off and I followed at a discreet distance. They drove to our house and he pulled into the garage. The door came down and I couldn't see anymore. I sat there for 30 minutes, but the thought of the tire made me nervous. I kept checking it, but if it was going down, I couldn't see it. After 2 hours, the door came up and they drove back past me. I held a file folder up in front of my face, but I don't think they would have noticed anyway. She was sitting right over against him and they were too busy looking at each other to notice anything else. Rachel didn't get off until 5 and it was 2:30. I'd have plenty of time. First, I'd have to go in and see what I could find. I had to pick Toby up at 4 and I had no idea what I was going to tell her. Toby was my 15-year-old daughter. I couldn't imagine what I was going to find inside, but maybe I'd get some answers. When I went inside, everything was quiet. I could hear the drip of that faucet I'd meant to fix in Toby's bathroom. That was the only sound aside from the whispering of the air coming from the air conditioner vents. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. I checked upstairs. The bed had been changed. There were fresh sheets. My heart sank like a stone. I put my back against the wall and slid down to the floor. I felt numb. There seemed to be only one rational explanation. I must have sat there for 30 minutes. My mind was in freewheel mode. I couldn't seem to make any sense of my thoughts and I felt as if I'd been drugged. My stomach began to feel queasy and I got up and opened a Sprite. I felt hot and sweaty, so I went back to the bathroom. I fumbled in the vanity for a washcloth, wet it in the sink, and washed my face with cold water. After washing, I felt a little better. Then I noticed something. The floor of the shower was wet. They had taken a shower before going back to work. I wandered back out into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in a daze, the bed that my wife and her lover had just vacated. I jumped up at that thought and looked at it in horror. This was the scene of the crime. I had no idea what I was going to do. Well, I was going to divorce Rachel. That went without saying. I was totally without a clue. I didn't know any lawyers. I had no idea how to proceed and I had to pick Toby out from school. Toby, what was I going to tell her? I made my way out to the car, feeling like I'd been drunk for 10 days straight. My head was throbbing and I looked like death warmed over. I was in no condition to drive, but I couldn't keep Toby waiting. I suddenly realized that she was the only thing in my life that I could really count on. My baby girl was going to be okay. I was going to have to see to that. Whatever I did, it was going to have to take her into account. When I pulled up in the line of cars, I could see her waiting at the school doors. She walked down the sidewalk toward the car. So beautiful, it hurt my heart. Toby had her mother's hair and skin, dark and almost Mediterranean looking. She had the most spectacular eyes I'd ever seen. They seemed to have her mother's dark brown, shot through with gold and streaks of green. The doctor called them hazel, but I'd never seen anything like them. She was tall, like me, all long honey brown legs and beauty. She opened the back door and threw in her backpack. When she got in, she slid across to kiss me and froze. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked. "Are you sick? Did something happen? Is Mom okay? What's wrong, Dad?" Her voice was rising and there was a note of fear creeping in. I had to say something. "I'm okay, kitten," I said. "No one is hurt or sick or anything. I need to talk to you, Toby. Let's go to the park and just let me hold you and talk to you for a minute, okay? Don't ask me any more questions until we get there, okay?" "Okay, Dad, but you're kind of scaring me," she said. "I know, kitten, but everything is going to be okay," I told her, hoping that it wasn't a lie. It only took us about 5 minutes to get to the park. I had pushed her on the swings 1,000 times. Rachel and I had both sat on the benches and watched her play on the equipment. Happier times was that all my life was going to be just reminiscing about happier times. We walked to one of the benches and she held my hand, swinging her arms as we walked, just the way she had since she was a tiny little thing just able to walk. We sat down and I struggled with the words to begin. "Just tell me, Dad," she said. "I can handle it." "Well, I'm not sure I can," I said. The story came tumbling out. I told her everything. Everything I'd seen, everything I was feeling, and the tears rolled down my cheeks like a river. She held my hand through it all, and when the fountain of words and feelings dried up, she snuggled up against me. "It doesn't sound good, Dad," she said. "We need to go home and ask Mom about it. I guess everything depends on what she tells us. I know it looks bad, but we don't know enough. We have to talk to her." I kissed the top of her head. My heart swelled with pride. My baby was so much braver than I was. She pulled out my hand until I stood up. "Want to drive?" I asked her, her eyes shone. She had just gotten her learner's permit. A cloud passed across those beautiful eyes as she thought, but it quickly passed. She drove carefully home, and Rachel's car was in the garage. This was it. She met us at the door with a hug and a kiss for each of us. Either she was an Oscar-winning actress, or I had misread the whole situation. "You two want takeout tonight?" she asked, my treat. "I think we just need to talk to you for a minute, Mum," Toby said. "Okay. Is everything all right, baby?" "I don't know," Toby said. "Let's find out." We went in, and I sat on the sofa beside Toby. That left Rachel to sit in that hideous chair she just had to have. "What's up?" she asked. There wasn't a single shred of concern on her features. How did your day go? I asked. She looked at me curiously. Just the usual, she said. One of the drug reps brought lunch from the onion bin. It was pretty busy, and I hardly had a minute. Why are you asking that? So you were at the office all day, Toby asked. Of course, she said. What are all these questions? What's going on? So you weren't at the house here with Jerry Garner this afternoon, I asked. Her face went pale. Of course not, she said. Aren't you accusing me of something, Oliver? I saw you, I told her. What? You didn't see anything, she was stammering now. What are you trying to do? He's lying, Toby. I was at the office all day. You can ask Angel. No, I don't think he's lying, Mom, Toby said. I think you're lying. I won't be asking Angel. She'd lie for you. I think I'll give David Jones a call. He's your boss, right? I don't think he'd lie for you. What's his number? He's left for the night, Rachel said. I'll have him call you tomorrow. What are you two doing? Are you trying to trick me or something? You think you can just come in here and try to trip me up? What are you accusing me of doing? I guess she thought the best offense was a good offense. I think you tripped yourself up, I told her. You lied, Rachel. All three of us know you lied. Why would you do that? I could see the wheels spinning in her head. Okay, I was here, she said. This is the reason I didn't want to tell you. I knew you'd give me the third degree and try to accuse me of something. No one has accused you of anything, Toby said. I'm accusing you of something now. You tried to make me believe that Dad is a liar. You tried to make him look like a liar to cover up your lie. What are you lying about, Mom? Are you having an affair with that jerk? You don't even know him, Rachel said. Why would you say he's a jerk? I've met him twice, Toby said. The way he looks at me makes me want to take a bath. That doesn't matter. Are you having an affair with him? Rachel's eyes moved back and forth between us for a moment, looking like a trapped animal. I didn't want it to be like this, she finally said. I wasn't ready. Wasn't ready for what? Toby asked. I'd just fallen in love with Jerry, she said. She looked over at me. I'm sorry, Oliver. It just happened. We worked together very closely, you know. He was just. I don't know. He's like the other half of my soul. We just connected and I couldn't help it. We're in love. I was going to tell you when we were ready. As soon as we can both get divorced, we're going to get married. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out this way. Toby, it's going to be okay. You'll still get to see your father whenever you want to. Jerry has a really nice place out on the lake. He has a daughter, too, you know. He likes you and we're going to be very happy. Aren't you nuts? Toby practically exploded. I'm not going to live with that jerk. You're right, I'm going to see Dad anytime I want because I'm going to be living with him. It's you who I'm not going to be seeing. How could you? She turned on her heel and walked upstairs to her room. I heard the lock on her door click. Rachel turned and looked at me. She'll get over it, she said. Jerry is really a good guy, Oliver. I think you'll like him. I'm sorry, but I need to be happy. Jerry makes me happy and that's all there is to it. I just stared at her. Who was this person? It was as if she'd been body snatched or something. I wasn't about to argue or discuss anything with a dangerous lunatic. Whatever. Rachel, I said. When are you moving out? Moving out, she said. I'm not. I don't have anywhere to go. Jerry is married and we can't do anything until we tell his wife. We'll all have to get divorces and see how the settlement is before we know what we need to do. No, you're moving out, I told her. I'll give you 3 days. Her jaw dropped. What the hell are you talking about? You can't kick me out of my own house. If anything, you should be the one who moves out. You're forgetting something, I said. This is my house. I owned it before I met you. It was paid for and I owned it clear before we got married. The house isn't a marital asset. It's mine. My name is on the deed and yours isn't. No, you're moving out of my house. Where? She asked. Are you just going to throw me out on the street? I really don't care where, I said. Maybe you could get a room down at the cheating motel. Maybe one of those rent by the hour places, you know. That's where you do the dirty, right? Her eyes filled with tears. That really hurts, Oliver, she said. There's no need for name-calling. I didn't try to fall in love with Jerry. It just happened. We just clicked and I knew I needed to be with him. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Ah, you just hurt me by accident, I said. Sort of like falling when you're running with a stick in your hand and poking your eye out. Mom always warned me about that. I see how it happens now. Well, that's okay then. It was an accident. There's no need to be so sarcastic either, she said. Why can't you just accept that we're in love, Oliver? Gee, I don't know, Rachel, I said. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that when I left this morning, you told me that you loved me. Now you're telling me that you love him. I guess I'm just a little confused. I do love you, Oliver, she said. I'll always love you. I'm just in love with Jerry. Oh, well, that explains it then, I said. You have told me every day for the last 18 years that you were in love with me, Rachel. I thought that was why we got married. We were in love. I guess I was delusional. Oh, no, we were in love, she tried to hold my hand. I shook her off. You've got 3 days, Rachel. If you're not out in 3 days, I'll have the sheriff remove you and throw your crap out in the driveway. Please, Oliver, she was scared now. It doesn't have to be this way. We can still be friends. Jerry wants to be your friend, too. We have Toby to think about. I told you that I love you, and I don't want to lose you as a friend. We've been together too long for you to just throw that away. I just stared at her for a minute. I could feel all that sadness, all that loss, just draining away to be replaced by a wave of white-hot anger. You must be nuts, Rachel, I said. Friends? With you? With that loser? I kind of think not. You should tell that piece of crap that if he sees me, it should be briefly, just before he runs away as fast as he can. As for you, you're the enemy, Rachel. I'm going to burn down your house. You have 3 days, then I never want to see you again. I'll talk to a lawyer in the morning, and you'll have your divorce as quickly as possible. I turned and went to the bedroom, leaving her standing there making noises. That's all they were to me. She followed me around, still spouting her crap about friends, all the time I was moving her stuff into the spare bedroom. She had more clothes in the closet than I could carry, and I just draped them over her, carried an armful to the spare bedroom, and hung them in a closet. She followed me. She stood there for a while yapping and watching me, but when she went to hang the clothes up, I took advantage of the situation to leave and lock the bedroom door. I heard her come down the hall, but she tried the knob and then went away. Toby texted me after a few minutes. You okay, Dad? Yes, kitten you. I texted back. No, but I will be, she said. Okay, love you, I sent. Text me if you need anything. Take me to school in the morning, she said. I don't want to be in the car with her. KK. I got in bed and laid there for hours, trying to figure out what I needed to do. I must have drifted off about 3, and then my phone alarm went off. I got up, took a shower, and called my boss. I told him that I was getting a divorce, and needed a few days off. He told me to take as long as I needed, and made all the right noises about how sorry he was. I went and made coffee, had a cup or two, and made some breakfast for Toby and me. She came down right on time, looking as beautiful to me as ever, and wolfed down her breakfast. Rachel came in and got a cup of coffee after a bit. She tried to talk to us, but we ignored her. It was time to take Toby to school, and Rachel asked her if she was ready. Toby just looked at her, turned to me, and asked, "You ready, Dad?" I jingled the keys, and she grabbed her backpack. "Okay, you can act like 2-year-olds if it makes you feel good," Rachel said. She stalked away and got her purse, shot us one more glare, and left. I took Toby to school, and she kissed me when she got out. I sat there and watched her go in. I was thinking of my friend Dan. He'd just been through a divorce, and I thought I'd give him a call and see what attorney he'd used. He didn't recommend his attorney. He told me I should use his wife's attorney. He gave me the name, and I looked up the number. When I called, a woman answered the phone and put me on hold after I told her what I wanted. She agreed to see me that afternoon, and I made all the usual moves. We had investments, and there wasn't going to be much I could do about that. I could make sure she didn't run up credit card bills, so I called and lowered the limits on our cards to $500. That would put a crimp in my style, too, but there was no way I was going to fund her little scheme. My appointment with Elizabeth Baxter didn't get off to an auspicious beginning. She had made some assumptions, and it was necessary to disabuse her of them before we could get started. Her assumption was that I was dumping Rachel for a newer model. "You need to think again," I told her. "She's been having an affair with her coworker. He's married, and they both plan to divorce and marry each other." "I apologize," she said. "I won't represent anyone who is making the kind of move you say she's making." I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. "I understand," I said. "We have a daughter. I want to minimize the fallout. Do you think it's possible for me to get custody of her?" "It's possible," she said. "In theory, either parent is considered as likely as the other to gain custody. In practice, fathers rarely get custody, especially of female children." "How old is she, and is she likely to want to stay with you?" "She said she did, and she's 15, I said. "That will weigh heavily in the court's decision," she said. "In this state, children over 14 get to choose, and younger children's wishes are always considered. If she was very young, you wouldn't stand a prayer. Having the primary residence and the fact that a 15-year-old wants to stay with you should be a major part of the custody arrangement. This shouldn't be a problem. Just do your best," I said. I drove home and wondered what I was going to do. I was going to do something, but it was going to have to be legal. Landing in jail would cost me Toby, and I wasn't about to risk that. What avenues were open? You have to be careful when burning down houses to make sure your own isn't on fire. This was going to take some thinking and planning. I suspected his wife was as clueless as I was, so the first step would be letting her know. I needed to make a list. I was certainly going to let her family know. Rachel's mom and dad loved me, and they certainly loved Toby, so letting them know was at the top of the list, but I wasn't sure how to go about it. Making sure all our friends knew was also on the agenda in a big way, and I thought I could get up enough of a social media storm to make their lives interesting. That was the first thing on my agenda. She had a Facebook account for our family. I played with it a bit, used Messenger a good bit, and I knew my way around. I searched around on the internet and found out that dear old Jerry's wife did the same. I screenshotted some pictures and posted on Rachel's page that we were getting a divorce, that she had found her soulmate in Jerry, posting a picture of him. I changed the password and logged out. That felt good. I wondered how long it would be before her friends and family started blowing up her phone and the Facebook page. I hoped the dude's wife would get the message. I didn't know her and felt some guilt about the disaster that would be descending on her, but if she was like I was, she would rather know than be ignorant. I called Mom. That conversation went about as badly as I thought it would, but beyond initial disbelief, she just told me she would tell Dad and that anything I needed, they were there for me. I decided I'd let Rachel tell her parents. We were close, and I didn't want to be the cause of any estrangement. I had no idea what I would say to them anyway. Somehow, your daughter is a cheating loser didn't seem like the ideal message. They would probably shoot the messenger. It didn't take long for things to hit the fan. About 2 p.m., Rachel's number showed up on my phone. I answered, and she was pissed. "You jerk." Her opening salvo gave me a great deal of personal satisfaction. "You couldn't just let it go, could you? I know you locked me out of Facebook. You take that down. Jerry's wife doesn't know. All my friends are calling me, asking me what happened. My parents know. I'm telling you, Oliver, take that down." "No, you aren't the boss of me," I told her. "What? Are you 5 years old? Take it down, Oliver, I'm telling you." "Why?" I asked. "You should be happy. Everyone can get used to you and your soulmate this way. Are you ashamed for people to know you're a pathetic cheater, Rachel?" "I'm not," she stopped. Evidently, she realized the absurdity of what she was about to say. "Oliver, please take it down. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You lost any ability to choose what it was going to be like the second you cheated," I told her. "Any right to consideration, any claim you have to my respect, or even politeness went up in smoke. I told you you're the enemy now, Rachel. Get used to it." I ended the call. My phone buzzed again, immediately, but I ignored it. It was time to pick up Toby. I told her the result of my conversation with Elizabeth Baxter, and while she was happy that she would most likely be with me, she wasn't at all happy in general. "What is wrong with her, Dad?" she asked. "You know I love her, but she's always been a little whack. I've never really felt like she was an adult. Not like you, anyway. It's always been like you have 2 kids, her and me. Have you ever noticed?" "Not like that," I said. "Now that you mention it, she's always been sort of impulse-driven, but she's always been like that. I never thought she'd do something like this." "Well, we're just going to have to make the best of it," she said. "Dad, I do not ever want to be in the same house with that creeper without you being there. I don't care what you have to do, make sure that doesn't happen, okay?" "I'll do my best," I promised. We picked up pizza on the way home, and I was just enjoying my second slice when my phone buzzed. It was Bob, Rachel's father. I wasn't looking forward to this. I told Toby who it was, and she told me to put it on speaker. He got right to the point. "Oliver, I don't know exactly what is going on, but Rachel came here last night and asked if she could stay with us. Care to explain how that happened?" "Did you ask her?" I said. "She said you kicked her out." "Well, I did." "But did she tell you why?" "No, she said she was going to explain, but she wasn't ready." "Are you sure you don't want to wait for her explanation?" I asked. "Can't you just tell me?" he asked. "She has been having an affair with Jerry Garner, a guy where she works. He's planning to divorce his wife." "She was planning to divorce me, and they're cooking up," I said. "What? That's crazy, Oliver. How do you know this?" "I caught them together yesterday," I said. "Besides," she told me. "Are you sure you didn't misunderstand?" he asked. Toby spoke up. "Hi, Grandpa. I've been listening. Dad has you on speaker. There is no misunderstanding. I was there when she told him." "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I love you." She sobbed, and he heard it. When he spoke again, his voice was cracking. "Don't cry, lovebug. Please, just be strong, okay? I love you too, and so does Grandma. I'll try and talk some sense into your mom. Oliver, you still there?" "Yes, I'm sorry, Bob. Don't worry about Toby. You are her grandparents, and nothing is ever going to change that. I know you love Rachel, and you'll do what you have to do. I respect you more than I have words to tell you. I hope you won't hate me when this is done. That's never going to happen, he said. I'll find out what's going on. Call me if you need anything. It went better than I feared. Things happen. You do the best you can. There is no need to detail what went on in the divorce process. Most people know plenty of people who have been through it. It was long, painful, and it never got any better. Rachel was apparently delusional. She had imagined she would get custody of Toby. That didn't happen. Miss Baxter was as good as advertised. I got full custody, based on Toby's desire to live with me, and after hearing Toby in a private meeting, the judge ruled that Rachel had unrestricted visitation, but not any that would involve Toby being alone with her and Jerry Garner. That became a non-issue in any case. His wife divorced him, but it seemed that the whole soulmate thing had been a little overblown, at least on his part. 2 weeks after my discovering their affair, he was on to a new conquest. All those grandiose plans evaporated like fog on a sunny day. It took 7 months for the divorce to become final. Rachel changed her mind. I was surprised at our second court appearance when she asked the judge to order counseling. Nothing I or Ms. Baxter could say seemed to have any bearing, and the judge ordered it. We were supposed to have 8 to 10 sessions. We got some weird old hippie dude. We were asked to state our goals in the first session. Rachel's was long and convoluted. It seemed like she thought that I should realize that seeking her happiness was the primary focus of the universe, and that I should understand that she had not meant any harm, only happiness. Mine was much simpler. What are your goals in these sessions, Mr. Berriman? He asked. My goal is to get them over with, I said. Our spirit guide frowned. Mr. Berriman, do you really have no interest in working on your issues that brought your marriage to this point? I'm sorry, Mr. Rodman, but it wasn't my issues that brought my marriage to this point, and I really do have no interest in working on them. I am quite happy with my issues and fully intend to die with them. Rachel was quite as horrified as Mr. Guru and did not hesitate to plunge in boldly. Oliver, how do you expect to get back to where we were if you aren't willing to at least discuss this? I don't, I said. Let me make it clear to you both. I give zero crap about getting back to where we were or working on issues. I'm here because of a court order. I will do what it takes to satisfy that court order, then we'll go back to court and get divorced. That's my plan. Are you aware that if I go back to the judge and report that you refuse to cooperate, you could be cited for contempt? Mr. Pathguide said. I'm not aware of that, I said. Do you mean if you go back to the judge and lie? These sessions are being recorded. I'm sure my attorney would be happy to subpoena the recordings and expose your perjury. I'm here, I'm doing whatever you say to do. You've asked me my goals. I told you what they are. See, I'm cooperating. He flushed. I'm sure the judge expected you to try to work out the issues between you, he said. I'm not responsible for the judge's expectations, I told him. I'm only responsible for mine. He tried to make it difficult. He gave me homework that included spending considerable time with Rachel, and she worked diligently to wear me down. Oliver, what will it take for you to drop the divorce and work this out? She asked. An act of God, I told her. She waited for me to explain that, but I said nothing. What do you mean, an act of God? She finally asked. Well, if you have a way to turn back time and not cheat with dear old Jerry, that would work, I said. Otherwise, I've never heard of anyone other than God with that power. Have you developed powers you haven't told me about, Rachel? Well, other than the power to attract other men with your feminine charms. We slogged on, dreary exercise after mindless mantra, and finally they were over. We went back to court, and the judge asked if we had made any progress. Your Honor, there is no possibility that my client is going to remain married to his wife, Elizabeth Baxter said. We would like to see this divorce granted as expeditiously as possible. My client and his daughter have been dragged through this process long enough. Evidently, the judge agreed, because 10 days later, the decree came in the mail. Toby saw her mother quite a bit, since she loved her grandparents and spent a lot of time with them. Rachel occasionally planned something that Toby would consent to do with her, but it was never the same. She hung with her friends, and one in particular seemed to be at the top of her list. She was a tiny little blonde thing named Sabrina. It seemed like she practically lived with us. She was cute as a month-old kitten, and as sweet as honey. I was happy to have her, and they began to include me in some of their activities. One of the things they loved was water skiing. We had a boat, and when summer vacation started, most Saturdays would find us at one of the nearby lakes. On a Monday, they asked me if we could go to the lake for the weekend, take our RV, and stay until Sunday evening. Since my social calendar wasn't exactly jammed, I thought it was a great plan. Toby and Sabrina spent the week planning, and we packed everything they wanted on Thursday. Friday afternoon, a new red Jeep Cherokee pulled up in our driveway, and Sabrina jumped out. A nearly identical female jumped out of the driver's side, and Toby went and threw herself on this unknown female in a robust hug. She and Sabrina led the unknown and clearly nervous one to me. "Dad," Toby said, "this is Julie. She's Sab's mom, and I know you haven't met her yet." Julie extended her hand. "Hello, Oliver. The girls have told me so much about you. Thank you so much for inviting me to go with you this weekend. To tell you the truth, I've been a little jealous that they spend so much time with you instead of me." She smiled up at me mischievously, and I instantly realized why her daughter was such a charming little minx. I looked over at Toby, and she gave me a fierce glare. My knees trembled, and I knew when to cave. The trembling intensified when I looked at Sabs, and she gave me one raised eyebrow. "It's going to be a blast," I told Julie, recovering the power of speech. "We always have a great time." She was no dummy. She looked from me to the girls, then back at me. "Oh my God," she said. "You didn't know, did you, girls?" She didn't have time to say another word. She was buried in an avalanche of hugs, kisses, and pleas. "Please, Mom, don't worry about it. We're going to have so much fun," from Sabrina. "It's okay, Julie. Dad is going to love you as much as I do, and he's a great guy," from Toby. "Look how he just went along." She disentangled herself and looked them over. "You two go sit on the porch, and I'm going to talk to Oliver," she said. They showed some reluctance, and she said, "Now." They took her seriously and scurried away. "I'm so sorry, Oliver. I had no idea," she said. "I'm going to take Sabs and leave. She's going to be grounded for a month. God, this is embarrassing." She looked so little and embarrassed that I stepped forward and hugged her. She stiffened at first, but then relaxed. "Yes, it is embarrassing," I said. "They are very naughty, but you and I both know there is no harm in them. Let me guess. You aren't married." She looked up at me and laughed. God, she was cute. "No, I'm not." "Do you think that's what this is about?" "I'm almost certain," I said. "Here's the deal. You're packed. You've cleared your weekend. It's going to be gorgeous at the lake. I'm not a bad guy, which you know from being around Toby. Let's play along. It will be fun. We might tweak them a little. What do you say?" She stepped back, looked over at the girls' expectant faces and said, "Yeah, let's go." I gave them the thumbs up, and they leaped to their feet, rushing over to join us. I heard Toby come out with an exuberant yeet. I stopped them and took one under each arm. "Pearls, that wasn't very nice," I said. Sabs looked up at me and cackled in her best Skeletor voice. "I am not nice." That broke us all up, and I couldn't go on. They were just too cute and too innocent. "We know what you're trying to do," I told them. "Stop. I mean it. You can't just go around trying to arrange other people's lives. Yes, but I love Jules, and I didn't know how to get you to meet her. Toby protested. Well, you could have just told me, I said. She looked a little sad. It's okay, kitten. Just don't do it again, I said. She brightened up immediately. Sabs tugged on my arm. Let's go. I can't wait. This is going to be sick nasty, Oliver. You'll see. Julie laughed. I believe that's supposed to be the ultimate in really cool, Oliver. She's right, though. We're killing daylight. We grabbed 2 bags out of her Jeep and climbed in. We had the boat hitched, and after a stop for propane, we were on the way. It was half an hour to the lake, and Julie sat up front with me. The girls got some awful music playing through their Bluetooth connections, and we got acquainted. Julie had her own insurance company, it turned out, and also did financial planning. I took her in as I glanced over at her in conversation. God, she was cute. I thought Sabs would look just like her when she was Julie's age. She looked quite a bit younger than I was, but it turned out it was just 3 years. She was probably 5 feet nothing, had light blonde hair down to her lower back, and a nice tan going. She had huge brown eyes, high cheekbones, and a perfect little heart-shaped face, including a widow's peak and a broad forehead. She was wearing jeans and a button-up top, but she was slender and willowy. I didn't want to perv on her, so I really didn't check her out until we got to the lake. We got a slip to park the boat, then the RV. They shooed me outside while they changed, and I got the water hooked up in the meanwhile. They came out when they were done changing, and I went in, slipped into trunks and a t-shirt, and we were ready. We took a cooler full of drinks, and we were off. We cruised out of the no-wake zone, and I opened it up. We ran a couple of miles down the lake, and they were ready to ski. Their long t-shirts came off, and the girls were their usual awkward beauty. Jolie was something else. There was nothing awkward about her. I said she was slender, but she was tiny. She was all woman. When she turned to watch the girls go over the back, I nearly lost my mind. She turned and caught me staring. She just smiled and gave me a wink. Done, she asked. Her smile took away the sting. Her teeth were perfect, too. I laughed. For now, you know what you look like, Jolie. I'm a man. She came up and sat where she could talk to me and keep an eye on the girls, too. We spent 3 hours skiing, and Jolie turned out to be very good. She drove the boat while I had my turn, and she was good at that, too. I wasn't as good as either she or the girls. The physics was just against me, but I held my own. We got back to the park, and they put on wraps. The RV had a perfectly good range, but the girls wanted to cook outside. We got out the camp stove, and I built a fire in the grill on the site. I grilled bratwursts while they cut up and fried potatoes and onions, and opened cans of pork and beans. We had prepared and packed some meals at home, but this was our first night, and camp cooking is always delicious. We sat at the picnic table the site provided, and we were soon like we'd known each other all our lives. Jolie became Jules. That's what the girls called her, and she liked it, and she called me Ollie. The girls mentioned several times that Jules wasn't married, and I finally asked her why. I mean, God, you're gorgeous, funny, smart. You've got your own business. Why hasn't some man snapped you up? She was quiet for a moment. Well, the main reason is Sabrina, she finally said. I was young and dumb, Ollie. I was a senior in college, and I thought I had the love of my life. I found out I was pregnant a week before graduation. I wasn't too unhappy. We had talked about getting married as soon as we graduated. I guess that plan didn't work, since you're talking about it in the past tense, I said. No, it didn't. 3 days after I told Brad, I found out he'd been cheating on me for a month. I dumped him and never looked back. When Saps was born, I didn't have time for a social life for a while. Then I got caught up in building my business. By the time I could catch a breath and even think about dating, I realized I had this precious gift from God in my life, and I couldn't do anything without considering her. I understand, I said. I feel the same way about Toby. As long as I have her, she comes first. I can't tell you how important she is to me. She's all that kept me sane the last 18 months. She placed her tiny little hand on my arm. I know, she said. She tells Saps and me everything. I'm so sorry, Ollie. Yeah, life sucks, sometimes. We both kind of sighed. We looked up and saw two pairs of approving and loving eyes on us. They were in whispered conversation, sitting in camp chairs under the shade of the awning. I love your daughter, I told her. It seems like she's almost mine all the time she spends with us. She loves you too, she said. She told me the other day that you're like the father she never had. When I looked at her, those huge brown eyes had become liquid, and a tear fell down one little brown cheek. I brushed it away with the back of one finger. She's a great girl, I said. I think her mom is a very special lady to have raised a girl like that. She's a very brave one, too, doing that by herself. She smiled with those brimming eyes, stood, kissed my cheek, and went to join the girls. We had a great weekend, and when she was pulling out to leave our house, I walked over and tapped on her window. Jules, would you think about going out with me next Friday? I asked. Saps squealed with delight, and Jules smiled that flashing smile. What time? 6, I asked. We'll have dinner and do something afterward, okay? Oh, can Toby stay with Saps while we're gone? Sounds great, and of course. She kissed my cheek, and they were gone. Toby was waiting for me in the entry. Well, she asked. Did you mask her out? Did you kiss her? I hound her and smacked her bottom. Yes, I did, and none of your business. She squealed, the same sound Saps had made. I knew it. She's perfect for you, Dad. I love her so much, and Saps is like my sister. I shrugged. What happens, happens, Toby. You can't force that. Stop playing matchmaker. She snuggled her face into my chest. I know, Dad, but you were never going to do anything but just love me if I didn't do something. Not that I don't like being the only woman in your life. I laughed. Well, you're always going to have a place in my heart no one else can touch. You're my baby, and that's never going to change. She purred and snuggled me for a minute, then went off to do Toby things. Our first date went well. I took her to play racquetball. She was new to the sport, but she played tennis, and the stroke mechanics were much the same. Once she got used to the rules and hitting off the walls, she was good. Being a natural athlete sure didn't hurt. She was as fast as lightning, and she could change directions much quicker than I could. That was where being tiny played to her advantage. We were cooling down at a table outside the courts after we finished drinking and resting. She grabbed her phone. Let's snap the kids, she said. We posed with our rackets and goggles, and she took a snap. They answered right away, and we had a good memory. We both showered, and I took her out to eat. It was very good Italian, and we made pigs of ourselves. We were finishing our wine, Jules sitting beside me in the booth, and we just leaned back, talking quietly and relaxing. It felt natural for me to put my arm around her, so I did. She scooted over against me and smiled up at me. I thought again how cute she was, and I realized she was always going to be cute. This was something that wasn't going to change as she aged. She leaned over to me when we pulled up at her house and looked up at me expectantly. I could tell she wanted me to kiss her, so I did. I wanted to kiss her even more than she probably wanted to be kissed. It was a long one and a delicious one. Her lips were plush and soft, and she tasted like wine and cherry chapstick. As we drew apart, I noticed the drapes move. I think we have an audience, I mentioned. She giggled, sounding very much like her daughter, or maybe her daughter sounded like her. I'm not surprised. You know they're trying to hook us up, right? Do you mind? I asked. She blushed. No, I like everything I know about you, Wally. Me too, I said. We better go in there before they tear down the drapes. We went out every Friday for 4 months. We were getting closer and closer, and I wanted to move our relationship along. I didn't want to push her, but some of our sessions were getting pretty steamy at the end. I also discovered that I liked having her for a friend almost as much as I liked having her for a girlfriend. We talked on the phone, constantly. She would snap or text me funny little things or just a few words several times a day, and I did the same. I would see something or hear something and know that Jules would get a laugh out of it, so I needed to share it with her. We were becoming very intimate, and I knew everything about her life as she did mine. We started having dinner together, all of us, every Tuesday, and we would just hang out, play games, and I was almost as in love with Sabs as I was her mother. They were very alike, and if you knew one, you knew the other almost as well. There were subtle and major differences, but they were both completely charming, and the differences just emphasized the similarities. Life was great, and the only cloud was the continued presence of Rachel. She was still part of Toby's life, so perforce of mine. I wanted nothing to do with her, and the sight of her irritated me. She never failed to try to talk to me every time she came to pick up Toby or I dropped her off at her grandparents'. She was still living with them. She lost her job, along with Jerry, at the clinic, and she was working at another private one across town. If she irritated me too much, I'd ask her if she'd heard from him. That quickly put a damper on her attempts. How long is it going to take for you to forgive me? She asked on one such occasion. Forgive you? For what? I asked. As far as I know, you don't believe you did anything wrong. Not one time have I heard, I'm sorry, Oliver, I was wrong. I'm sorry I tried to make Toby believe you were a liar. I'm sorry I tried to take her away from you, tried to rape you in the divorce. And worst of all, I've not once heard, I'm sorry I cheated and slept with that dirtbag behind your back. I didn't hear it then either. She could take no responsibility for her actions. I didn't really know what forgiving her would entail. I was reconciled and at peace. I didn't forget, but I sure wasn't going to waste a minute being bitter about it. People have the right to do dumb stuff. They have the right to divorce you, dump you, end their friendships with you, and you just accept it and move on. People do crappy things every day. In the heat of the moment, I wanted to punish both the cheaters, but I quickly got beyond that. Their punishment was being who they were. They had to live with themselves. I fully intended to live with myself, and that meant putting the lying and cheating behind me and living my best life. Rachel was an unhappy woman, and I sincerely wished any bad luck in the world on dear old Jerry, but it wouldn't come at my hand. Let God or the universe punish them. I was out of that game. She became even more unhappy when she discovered that I was dating Jules. I had dropped Toby off at her grandparents' for the night, and she came out to the car and stopped me. I hear you're dating one of Toby's friend's mother, she said. I just looked at her. Is it true? She asked. That's my business, I said. The hell it is, she snapped. I'm your wife. I have a right to know. You have crap for rights, I told her. You aren't my wife. You found your soulmate, and it wasn't me, remember? Then this thing called a divorce happened. My business is no longer yours, and yours is none of mine. Be quiet, Rachel. Don't stick your nose in mine again. I was steaming when I left. I told Toby what had happened. She was just as pissed off as I had been. That ended my dropping her off at her grandparents' or Rachel picking her up at her house. Bob or Cindy, the grandparents, came to our house and got her from then on. That took away a major source of stress in my life. On our 7-month anniversary of the trip to the lake, I took Jules out. We went to a nice restaurant and out to a club. She didn't drink much, just a beer now and again or one drink. She had two that night. I raised an eyebrow when she ordered the second. She laughed. Yeah, I'm wild and crazy tonight, huh? You're perfect, just like you always are, I said. Do you really think so, Ollie? She bent her head sideways in that way she had. Because I think you're pretty perfect too. If I'm so perfect, why haven't you invited me to spend the night? I must have looked pretty startled because she laughed. Have you not even thought about it? I found my presence of mind. Yeah, Jules. I've thought about little else since that first day on the boat when I saw you in that bikini. When we started dating, I realized you were something different, something special, and I didn't want to pressure you or scare you off. You won't scare me off, she said. I told the girls not to wait up. Really? Well, what are we doing here? I asked. Oh my God, Jules. Let's get out of this place. Do you want to spend the night with me? She blushed as she took my hand and allowed me to pull her to her feet. More than anything else in the world right now. She practically melted herself into me as we made our way out, and she leaned over with her head on my shoulder and holding my arm all the way home. I let her out when we pulled into the garage, and she was pressed up against my side all the way to the bedroom. I turned her around at the foot of the bed and kissed her. It was one of the most incredible kisses I'd ever had, and it went on and on. When we stopped to breathe, she looked up at me, and I drowned in the warm brown pools of her eyes. She put her arms around my neck and looked in my eyes. Make love to me, Oliver, she said. I'm kind of afraid. Don't be, I told her. I love you, Julie Barnes. You know that, right? I thought you did, she murmured. I needed to hear it. I love you too, Oliver. We fell asleep in each other's arms, and twice during the night we made love again, once when I initiated it and once when she did. I awoke the next morning lying on my back with an angel sprawled half over me, her hair covering us and her cheek pillowed in the hollow of my shoulder. I just watched her sleep, playing idly with her hair until she opened her eyes. She snuggled in and moaned. I belong here, Ollie. I know, I said. Would you like to wake up here every morning? She opened her eyes and looked at me. You mean, like live together? No, sweetheart. Well, yes, but I mean, will you marry me, Julie Barnes? She brought her little left hand up between her faces and wiggled her fingers. Oh, no, she said. Something seems to be missing. Hold that thought, I said. I started to get out of bed. I'll hold the thought, she said, but I can't hold something else. I need to pee so bad. I laughed and swatted her but, making her squeal. Go, then meet me back here. She scampered off, a little naked sprite, and I went down to my office, stopping to use the facilities myself. I got what I'd come for out of my safe, and when I got back, she was a little ball under the covers. I climbed in and took that left hand again. I looked in her eyes and saw only love there. Julie, will you marry me? I slipped the ring on her finger. It was too big and we'd have to resize it, but it would do for now. She held it up and looked at it. It's beautiful, she said. It looks old. Where did you get it? When did you get it? Remember I told you I was going to an auction? I said, it was about a month ago. Yes, I remember. They were auctioning off an estate, right? Yep, what I didn't tell you was I saw this ring in the catalog, and I went with the intention of buying it and asking you to marry me. It was made in England about 1810 for the Duchess of Avon. It has a long history. Do you like it? I love it, she said. It's the most beautiful ring I've ever seen. Are you going to answer my question? I asked. What? Oh, yes, Oliver. Yes, I'll marry you. Oh my God, yes. I laughed and squeezed my fiancé in my arms. We need to snap the girls. May I ask what you're doing, sir? Said the man to my left, just outside my car window. Yes, you can, I replied. Ask? That's not exactly what I meant, the voice said. I want to know what you're doing. Of course, I noticed, and was well aware that the person asking was wearing the uniform of a city cop. I wasn't so drunk that I didn't realize that fact. I was feeling pretty good by this point. The reason for my flippant response was that I just didn't care about anything right now, especially stupid questions, no matter who was asking them. I'm sitting here enjoying the moonlight reflecting in the lake, sipping my single cask selected whiskey. It's a soothing sight, I replied. I don't like to be pretentious, but I like the flavor of this particular whiskey. I spent the extra money to buy it, and I intend to enjoy it. And if I may say so, it's a little better than the blended variety on offer. At least this time. And something about the moonlight is soothing. Sir, are you drunk? A voice asked. Almost, I replied. I hope to be there soon. In fact, I'm hoping to kill a few brain cells tonight. I'd like to destroy a few million suckers who tell me I love this bitch I'm married to. At the very least, I'd like to get to the point where I can get rid of her without much remorse. Okay, we can get to that in a minute, the voice said. You do realize that driving while intoxicated is a felony? Yes, sir, I do, I replied. But I would like to point out that I am not driving the vehicle. I am just sitting in it, drinking and getting drunk. This vehicle is equipped to not operate or at least not move if the driver is intoxicated. The driver must enter a 4-digit PIN and blow into this device. I pointed to the straw above the ignition switch. Any alcohol content in excess of 3/4 of the legal limit renders the vehicle inoperable. I am definitely not fit to drive this vehicle. The voice pointed to the interior lights on and the radio, or at least the audio system. Yep, everything works, I said. I want to be able to see well enough not to spill whiskey. I can listen to music if I want, but right now I just need a little background noise. It's cool enough in here that I don't need air conditioning. I would also like to point out that while the engine can automatically turn on from time to time to recharge the battery, the car cannot be put in gear and driven, added I. So, care to explain why you're sitting here in the city park drinking, a voice suggested. I looked at it carefully. Well, sir, I offered. I needed a place to sit and gather my thoughts. The house doesn't lend itself to that at the moment. I wondered how he would react to my changed manner of speech. You don't need to call me, sir. Officer will suffice, or you can call me by my first name, Gary, he said. May I see your driver's license? I held them out to him and he handed them to his partner. I'm sure he'd already run the license plate number, so he knew it belonged to me. Maybe he was just checking to see who was using the car. I almost laughed out loud. I could understand some of the politically correct bullshit that society fed us, but for cops to call themselves by their first name in a non-violent encounter? This guy seemed unfazed. Well, instead of calling you sir of 3 syllables, I decided to shorten it and call you sir, said I. He gave me a hard look and then grinned. You're not that drunk, are you? He asked. He could tell I was just playing smart. Oh yeah, I'm that drunk anyway, I replied. It's just that I'm not that stupid and I can hold my own. At least not right now. I really don't care if I'm too drunk to handle it. I saw the cop's partner step back to give me my license back. They clearly weren't going to leave, but they didn't order me out of the car either. I wondered about that. They stood hunched over and watched me, feeling uncomfortable. Both declined my offers of a drink or to sit in my car where they could relax. Their sergeant arrived and talked to them. I guessed later that they had quickly established my identity when the first officer returned, walked around the car and sat in the passenger seat. How about we have a little chat, Mr. Jacobs? I liked the young man. I told him that the last Mr. Jacobs I knew was my father. My name was John. He smiled and nodded. He then asked if I needed to call someone. I shook my head and said no, not unless I was forbidden to continue drinking, in which case he could call my lawyer. You are allowed to drink alcoholic beverages in the park until 2 in the morning, he said. Then I'll sit here until I'm ready to leave and either call an Uber or have my daughter come get me. I'll need to talk to her either way. By the way, why did you decide to sit with me? I got special permission. I'm not sure exactly why. The sergeant told me to sit with you and talk, he offered. Why? What do you know about me? I asked. No big deal. It all started with a simple man drinking in a car in the park call. As soon as we identified you, I was told to sit down and start talking, and here I am. I have no idea what that means. My sergeant said I could have one drink if the situation called for it. He'll sign it. That fact alone makes me think there's more to the story. But I'm still not going to drink beer or whiskey. Have you got any soda or water? The young policeman said. It's whiskey from the same cask. It's almost sacrilege to dilute it, I exclaimed with a smirk. But there might be a soda in the refrigerator behind your chair that you might like. I like to have something caffeinated every now and then, so I have some in stock. He reached back to open the built-in refrigerator. What kind of car is this? From the outside, it looks like a regular little hybrid. But everything about it is high-tech. This is no ordinary car, he asked. Who are you? I ignored the young policeman's obvious confusion and changed the subject by asking. Are you married? He shook his head. Well, I'll be married for a while yet. Have you ever thought about marriage, or rather the sanctity of marriage? Fidelity versus infidelity? Well, yes, Gary offered hesitantly. I would expect my wife not to have fun with anyone, and I certainly wouldn't. I had a girlfriend who thought that since we weren't married, she could have sex with whoever she wanted. We are no longer together once I caught her with a guy in our apartment. I asked him what he had done. I almost did enough to get kicked off the police force. I showed him my service weapon. When I got home, he was already entertaining her. If I had known it was being recorded, I might have punched him, but I never would have pulled my weapon. I laughed and held out my fist for a punch. He grinned back. Sure, he begged, cried, almost shit himself, and then tried to file a complaint. They took him aside and told him he'd have a hard time if he pursued anything, and he couldn't even walk down the street without having to show his ID every block or two. And if he spit on the sidewalk, he would be arrested. He figured it out and left town. I, of course, got a letter of reprimand anyway. It was a complete gift, and only because a senior officer had gotten into a similar situation a few months before and was covered up. Well, that's a better story than mine, I admitted. I would have loved to catch the bastard while he was entertaining my wife. Maybe I would have pulled the trigger, even if the bastard was half my size and a dozen years younger. Gary looked at me. Okay, I take it your wife is cheating and you know who it is. I nodded. The guy was perceptive. You didn't catch them in the act? I shook my head. My wife Donna said the dumb line to me. We need to talk. She didn't even say darling. I have no more respect than Rodney Dangerfield, I said. I came home after a long day at work, and there was my wife and sister-in-law waiting for me with a couple small suitcases. I walked through the door and was ambushed. Shit, Gary exclaimed. What happened? They tell me I'm a worthless bastard, I said, taking a sip of whiskey. Well, not in those terms. My wife says she's found someone more exciting, more suited to her needs than me. Doris, her sister, sits back and smirks, listening to me. I ask her what she is talking about, and she replies that she has found a real man who puts her needs before his own and makes her feel like a real woman, I said. Her sister nods like one of those little dogs you see on the back window of a car. And then the bitch, I mean sister-in-law, says he has enough money to support her the way she deserves. So no arguments or talk of divorce. You better get over it and let her have fun with no nonsense. She went on to tell me that this guy was man enough to handle both of them and rock their boats. So apparently, both women are whores to this guy. That's what hurts? Not the she was cheating part. I didn't even have time to fully realize that part. It was that I hadn't filled her needs or made her feel like a woman. Oddly enough, that was exactly what my first thought was. Plus, I couldn't or wouldn't support her. I have to admit I was confused. Donna has never complained about our sex life before, so I know I'm adequate and good to her in that regard, but I was clearly wrong about supporting her lifestyle. Do you think I modified this car to avoid getting a DUI? I built it because my brother-in-law was a chronic drunk and I was trying to protect his ass. To fulfill his duty as a member of the extended family. He had to enter a PIN number and blow into an analyzer before getting behind the wheel after drinking. I always suspected the reason he drank so much was because of his bitch of a wife. He was a nice guy and stayed with her because of his kids, even though they were grown. One night this idiot couldn't start his car and agreed to give one of his drunk friends a ride and both of them died. I took the car back. Let's get back to your wife, Mr. Jacobs, the young policeman said patiently. I asked him to call me John. All right, John. Tell me about the time you met your wife. I grinned. You're writing this down, aren't you? I still can't figure out why you're sitting here with me. Do you have a degree in psychology or something? Is it one of those newfangled, woke interventions? I asked, taking a sip. Not that I care. I'm going to sit here and drink until you arrest me or I have to pee. Oh, I get it. You'll wait until I come out and arrest me for either public intoxication or urinating in a public place. Gary shook his head. No, neither of those things is anything more than a minor fine. One of my bosses made the decision that I should sit here with you and that's exactly what I'm going to do. My degree is in engineering. I went to school through the ROTC program and after college, I served 4 years in the Army. After I got discharged, I needed a job and the police department was just hiring. So 2 years later, I'm here. An engineer, huh? I said. Well, maybe later I'll show you how this machine works. You might enjoy the tour. Anyway, back to my story. My wife Donna told me I was worthless shit. Not exactly her words, but the meaning is the same. Her sister agrees. They picked up their small suitcases and laughing, headed out the door. My wife says she'll be home Sunday afternoon or evening and we'll talk things over. It's unlikely I'll be there. I muttered. I have a daughter who just graduated from college and I need to call her. But I'm a little scared. She's at such a vulnerable age right now. Trying to start a career and maybe a social life. Living on her own for the first time. How am I going to tell her that her mom is a cheating whore? Worse, what if she already knew and was afraid to tell me? Even worse, what if she knew and condoned my wife's cheating? I wouldn't survive such a betrayal. I began to shake. I almost fainted. Hey kid, Gary said sharply to bring me out of my reverie. I mean John, Mr. Jacobs. He paused to regroup. Let's deal with this in order. You haven't spoken to your daughter, have you? I nodded and then shook my head, not knowing how to answer. Tell me about her, said Gary. I relaxed a little. I love my daughter. She came along just a year after my wife and I got married. We got married when we were both still in college. My wife said no more kids, so that's it. One child, regardless of my wishes. I know what you're thinking, but yes, my daughter is mine. She even looks like me, or rather other women on my side of the family. Thank God she's not as ugly as me. Gary laughed and I was relieved. She's smart as a whip and decided to study computers instead of engineering, even though she has aptitude. Maybe you should call her right now, Gary suggested. I mewed and shook my head. He shrugged, but I realized he wasn't going to let it go unchallenged. Later. Maybe. I agreed, not thrilled with the idea. I don't want to leave my car here and I'll need a ride. I need to work that out. I'm just not ready to drive. That's part of what I'm thinking about. I'm making plans on how I'm going to proceed. If you keep drinking that whiskey, you won't remember any of these plans anyway, suggested Gary. Of course I will. I said. I have a tape recorder. I take notes. I'm sorry. I should have told you that our conversation is automatically recorded. I just assumed you had your camera on. I expect everything I say to be recorded. So do you know who your wife is dating? Asked Gary. I nodded my head. At that time, he got a call on his radio. He walked away from my car. A few moments later, he came back. Mr. Jacobs, what do you do at Async Robotics? He asked. I shrugged and said I was an engineer. Gary smiled. More to the point, a very high-ranking engineer, right? I nodded. This isn't just a sit-down and talk thing anymore. My captain said you're the man who designed some of their advanced prosthetics. He was just on the line. He said you're the reason his daughter is walking again. You developed a prototype prosthetic limb. They help existing limbs function properly. That answers the question of why I'm sitting here talking to you. He personally asked me to give you the latest news. I shrugged. He's obviously interested in you. Please, sir, Mr. Jacobs, don't screw this up for me. I could tell he should have kept some of what he said to himself. I wondered how Eddie knew I had been contacted by his officers. I suspected that he had flagged my name so that he would be informed immediately of anything that concerned me. It wasn't exactly legal in my opinion, but it was nice that he cared about me. I'd known Eddie since junior high school. His teenage daughter had suffered a boating accident 2 years earlier and lost the use of her right leg. He gladly allowed me to use his daughter as a test subject for one of my prototypes, and now his daughter is back on her feet and walking. Eddie and I have remained close, and I was happy to help. I'd like to take you home, sir, said Gary. I resolutely declined. How about I take you to a hotel? You'll sleep it off and then approach tomorrow with fresh perspectives. Really? You think I'm going to look at the world better tomorrow than I do today? Snapped at me. No. I said fresh perspectives. It means clear head, Gary explained. Making decisions rationally and not clouded by alcohol. I said I liked alcohol and wasn't ready to go anywhere yet. He shrugged. He tried to distract me a bit by asking me about the prosthetics I was developing. I told him that it was just one of our divisions. We had several ongoing projects. We were also working on features that would allow us to create self-driving cars. I could see that he was visibly interested in some of the technical aspects. He asked what other projects were being developed. We launched a line of voice-controlled robots to improve the lives of paraplegics. To give them some independence in their daily lives. For example, voice-controlled motorized wheelchairs. Some of our devices can do more than that. We've even worked on robotic arms that could lift objects and even help the user eat. We worked on a robot that could wipe a guy's butt. We had a little hiccup when one of our testers got excited and yelled. Well, humor me right now. I squinted to see how intently Gary was listening. He stared at me for a second and then burst out laughing. I realized that he had a sense of humor too, just like me. Tell me why you wanted to become a police officer, I asked. You seem to have the technical aptitude and the proper credentials. Why didn't you apply to Async Robotics? Yes, they weren't hiring. I got a letter saying they would keep my resume on file, Gary said. I realized it was a cop-out and my resume ended up in a round file. And I needed a decent paying job locally. My mom needed financial help and my sister is in college. So it's just the way it is. I wasn't so drunk that I couldn't see this guy's potential. Send me your resume directly and stop by and see me in a few days. I have a few obvious personal issues to work out first, but I'll see what I can do. That's if you're still interested in that kind of career. He muttered a thank you, then took a deep breath and went back to the task at hand. He wasn't going to allow himself to be distracted and bribed. How did you get the name of the guy your wife is dating? He asked. I followed my wife and her sister to the Marriott. No one pays attention to such a small hybrid sedan. I watched them as they met the guy in the lobby. That was all it took. The guy hugged and kissed both my soon-to-be ex-wife and my sister-in-law. Gary looked at me suspiciously. He hadn't stated the obvious, that I had to know this man, and I did. Yeah, I know the creep. A smarmy asshole. I'm wondering if he's deliberately determined to cheat me or just playing games, but he's certainly not a rich man who can provide my wife with a better life like she thinks. I guess you make a pretty good living, Mr. Jacobs, John, said Gary. I mean, if you are a senior engineer, after all. Well, I suppose you're quite an older man. Judging by your age and the way you talk about work. I wonder why your wife thinks she needs more money. Or did she just say that to bother you? Ah, you're wondering if Donna is just a bitch. She's a money-hungry bitch who's thinking about switching, said I. Probably both. We have a pretty active sex life. A couple times a week. I'm only 45, and I'm not slowing down too much in that regard. At least, I don't think so. My wife might argue with that. But she seems fine with it. We seemed compatible. I think she's just getting nervous. And talking to her bitchy sister probably gave her those thoughts. My sister-in-law is one of those compulsive personalities. She gambles and wins a few $100. You know, hits a little jackpot. Next thing you know, she loses it all back and heads to the ATM for more money. She'll say she hit the jackpot once, so it's bound to happen again. By the end of the night, she is drunk as hell and out of money. She has a decent job that should be enough to live on. But she is always broke and barely able to pay the bills, even though her kids are grown and out of the house. My wife seems to bail her out all the time, and it has become a point of contention. I think she tosses her sister money a lot. In fact, I'm pretty sure she does. I usually try to keep quiet about it. After my brother-in-law died, Doris started seeing different men. I stayed out of it, too. I think money is a big part of the problem with my wife. I don't bring home enough money for her. She works as a school administrator, so we have a dual income. We live well, we have a modest but very nice house, and I paid for my daughter's college tuition so she can avoid student loans. At least once a week, we go out to eat at a nice restaurant. We travel a couple times a year, and she sometimes buys jewelry, especially when we go on cruises. But she wants more. More fancy cars, even though ours are only a couple years old. She got mad when I bought this car for my sister-in-law in exchange for one of our mortgages. She said a simple hybrid was beneath us, even though this car was geared far beyond simple. She drives a small sports coupe but wants more. She argues that I should go and demand a pay raise. I know I can get it, but she'll just spend the extra or give it to her sister and we'll be back to square one. I didn't bother to add that my brother has a nicer house, or at least a bigger house than mine, and he also has more kids. I told Donna years ago that we didn't need a big house with lots of useless unfilled bedrooms. She never budged on the no more kids issue. I don't mean to be an ass, but it sounds like your wife is unhappy that you don't insist on a pay raise. It seems to her that you have to demand it, even though you think your lifestyle is good. She thinks all you have to do is ask and you'll refuse, suggested Gary. Well, part of it has to do with my brother being my boss, I said. Gary looked at me in confusion. Yes, Bob is the CEO and general manager. The thing is, we make the same income, which my wife also knows. She just thinks we both underestimate ourselves. I didn't want to reveal the rest of the story. Not then, and not to a man I didn't know well and who had heard more about my personal life than he should have. Bob and I not only worked at a sink, but we owned it, or rather, our trust owned the controlling interest. We set the income level to be comfortable, but not excessive. My older brother Bob was also an engineer, but he liked the business side and got an MBA, and when he graduated, he started a small firm making computerized control units for various electronics. We used money from our inheritance, which was locked up in a trust. The trust paid for both of us to go to college. Of course, Bob hired me before I even graduated from university. The company paid me while I went back to school to get my college degree. I was married with a child at the time, so my wife was happy for the money. We just never communicated how the company infrastructure worked. Our families just assumed we were in leadership positions because we had been with the company since its inception. We hired talent to keep the company running, even though for many years HR hired most of the employees. The trust protected the company, but all of our individual assets were subject to community property laws. That's what I was thinking when Gary and his partner knocked on my window. So your wife thinks you're too soft-hearted to go along with your brother and demand to be paid what you're worth, suggested Gary. I nodded. He didn't talk about it or ask, but I could tell he was wondering if I was a wimp. Maybe in my wife's eyes I was, but I was happy with my job and my current lifestyle. We could have had an even better life if she hadn't spent our money on her sister. So have you made any decisions yet? He asked. I answered him that I was going to get a divorce. I wasn't going to put up with disrespect. 24 years of marriage, be damned. I think you need to talk to your daughter. You may be afraid of her reaction, but you need to hear it, he suggested. I reluctantly nodded. Then he offered to drive me home, and when I flinched he said, well, your wife won't be there. But I can understand why you wouldn't want to stay there. You know, to be perceived as a rejected husband waiting for his wife to come home. I raised my middle finger. He shrugged and smiled, realizing he was getting a backlash. If it were me, I'd pack up my wife's things and try to stake out my territory. But if things work out like one of my coworkers, your wife will just move back in. I'd at least secure some personal effects. Change the combination on the safe, if you have one. Gather some important papers. Just no traveling today. I thought about it, I admitted. I just didn't want to risk him getting mad and starting to smash everything around. Or maybe burn everything to the ground. I've been fantasizing about that. The house is paid for, and I don't think it would be a crime if I didn't take out insurance. Gary shook his head. Getting drunk and staying in a hotel is certainly cheaper than letting anger override common sense and losing your temper. You probably won't be arrested for arson, but your wife could still sue you for destroying her stuff even if she doesn't press vandalism charges. Besides, she owns half of it all. It's not worth the risk. He frowned. Even the fact that my girlfriend cheated on me wasn't a reason to kick her out of the house. Not legally. Since she was already living there and considered her home, she could stay. We have stupid laws about evicting people. I asked him how he'd handled it. She stayed in the apartment, but that didn't mean I had to stay with her. So I moved all my stuff out, and I mean all my stuff. The furniture was mine. So when I was done, all that was left was her clothes hanging in the closet. And what was in the dresser was neatly stacked on the floor. Her toiletries were still in the bathroom, and her computer and all her books and stuff were on the floor. I left food in the fridge because she had bought some of it, but no cup or plate to eat out of, no pot to cook in. My buddies helped, so they all witnessed that nothing was destroyed or ruined. I had to laugh. Or cry at the thought that this part of my life was over. My marriage was over. I just couldn't let Donna treat me like that. When Gary once again suggested I call my daughter, I agreed. I first asked him to drive me to the drugstore to buy a toothbrush and then to the hotel. I stipulated that it would not be a Marriott. As soon as I checked into the hotel, I called my daughter. Gary called one of his coworkers to pick him up, and after we exchanged phone numbers, he left. "Daddy, why are you at the hotel?" my daughter June immediately asked. "Did something happen between you and Mom?" I told her I would prefer to talk to her in person if she was free. "Hell yeah, I'm free. I'm off to dinner with friends, but I'm always available to help you. I'll be there as soon as I can." As I hung up, I realized I forgot to tell her not to call her mother before we talked. But then I decided I didn't care if she did. "What's going on?" asked June as soon as I opened the door to my room. She frowned, looking at my half-drunk state. "The fact that you're drunk means Mom did something. I think whatever she did was stupid and hurtful. She's not stupid enough to try to kick you out. You would have burrowed into the ground. She left you, didn't she?" "She's gone to Aunt Doris's." I asked how she knew that. "I drove by the house, but I didn't stop. Aunt Doris's car is in the driveway, but on one side, in front of your part of the garage." "I can't tell if Mom's car was there," said June. "Oh, shit. Did they leave together for a party or worse?" June asked the last word, moving closer to see my reaction. I nodded. "Shit," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around me and clinging to me, crying. "I'm so sorry, Daddy." I couldn't help myself and began to sob. Despite the anger and resentment my wife had left in me, I knew my little girl was on my side. I loved her, but I can't put up with this. 24 years wasted, lamented I. Not the bottom. Just a new beginning, Daddy. "You have me," proclaimed June as we hugged. I was glad she didn't immediately protest and tell me I needed to forgive. Finally, I had to ask. "Did you know about this? Warned me in advance?" She shook her head and hesitated before continuing. "Well, I suspected something was wrong. She and Aunt Doris have been spending a lot of time together." "Surely you've noticed that," suggested June. I agreed. "She even stayed overnight at her sister's house sometimes." The light bulb came on. June continued. "Well, Doris has a lot of fun. I mean, going to bars and dancing and stuff like that. She didn't talk about it explicitly, but I'm sure she slept around. She'd see some guy and comment that he had a cute ass. That sort of thing? Mom said she wished she could do that. Then she'd quickly add something like, but I'm married. And sometimes she complained that you could make more money. All you had to do was go and ask for a raise." June blushed. "I don't like to say this, but Mom did a few times. If your daddy had grown balls, he could have gone and demanded to be paid what he was worth. For goodness sake, he can't even stand up to his own brother." I shrugged and said we had enough money to live well if Donna didn't spend it. "Oh, I know. I've seen her spend money. Especially after you wouldn't let me. You gave me an allowance the whole time I was in school. That is, even after all my bills were paid. You told me to consider it my payment for studying and getting good grades. I had to live on that amount or do without it. I think you purposely limited me to that amount so that I would learn to budget," said June. She interrupted the conversation by looking in the minibar. "I can't drink this rotgut straight. I need to mix it up. Do you want to pay for this minibar or do you want me to go down to the lobby and use the soda machine? I need a drink while you tell me what happened." The thought made me laugh. Even now she looked at me sparingly. She was my daughter. "First of all, it's not rotgut. It's an expensive single-barrel whiskey. It cost me over $50 a bottle. But save that walk. We'll spend the money. Half of it will still go to your mother when we sort out the estate." That statement threw June off balance. "So it's not something you're willing to forget and forgive?" "It's more than an argument about money," said June. I told her it was much more than that and laid it all out. I told her in detail how I had spent the time from the time I got home until she showed up, including watching her mother and aunt's actions in the lobby of the Marriott. A policeman sat with you in your car and then drove you here? She asked, flabbergasted. I nodded. He's a good guy, I said. Smart. He's going to succeed at whatever he does. He gave me some advice. Like not coming home and burning the house to the ground or not throwing all my mom's shit out on the lawn for the neighbors to see. I'm not going to hide anything from anyone, though. She's made her decision. I've made mine. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to let everyone know what a cheating bitch she is. She might even like the publicity that it's on the menu and available. Maybe she's deluded enough to think like she can switch like she said she would. Or maybe she's trying to push some kind of agenda to get me to go along with her new decision to do what she wants. By that I mean she needs to know that she can't share the same guy with her sister. Not in the long run. The whole idea is just stupid. That's what she's saying. You've been sitting around thinking about all this while sitting in your car drinking? Asked June, mildly amused. I'm not as stupid as everyone thinks, I said. I can think the situation through. Your mother wasn't just suddenly seized by some impulse to become a whore. She and your aunt planned it. It must have been in preparation for some time. June nodded, listening. It used to bother me how much she could tell you. And if you were on board? That got a reaction. June stared at me with her mouth open. It turned into a grin, then softened. Tears appeared in her eyes. You can't believe I'd be part of some plan to screw you over, Daddy. I shook my head. I knew for a fact that she had no idea of her mother's intentions. Tonight, as I sat drinking, all sorts of thoughts crossed my mind. How it happened, what really happened, who knows? I said. My thoughts were all sorts of different things. Well, I can tell you this, stated June. She may be my mother, but that won't stop me from telling her what a stupid bitch I think she is. She asked me what I was planning on doing in the near future. I told her what Gary had said about how he handled his girlfriend's cheating. He's no expert, but I have to applaud the way he handled the situation, I said. He was decisive, acted straightforward, but kept his cool. I hope to be just as cool-headed. But I can tell you there's no turning back. I just can't forgive this. This isn't some one-time drunken mistake that can be smoothed over with counseling. This was a deliberate decision to destroy me. To rub my nose in it. Your mother may try to tell me it was just sex. Or she was just trying to get my attention. Well, if that's the case, she ruined it, June said. You've always been hard on me. Not that I couldn't get a lot out of you. But I knew when I was out of line. Your bottom lip would quiver slightly when you were angry. And you kind of slumped your shoulders back when your decision was final. That's when I realized the game was over. I guess this isn't the time to discuss how you're going to help me convince Uncle Bob to give me a job at eSync, asked June with a smirk. I knew she had applied and gotten a few offers. But they were all out of state. Now I'll have to stay close to home to support you. I laughed, but felt much better. I wanted her to be her own person and do what benefited her. So I never pushed her to work for Bob and me. Of course, I would have been happy for her to come work in the family business. But now was not the time for big openings. We'll work it out, honey, was all I said. June and I sat and talked for several hours. After a few drinks, she was too drunk to drive. So we went to the lobby for a free toothbrush. She slept in the other double bed. I heard her get up a couple times to go to the bathroom. I woke up to the sound of the shower running. June appeared fully dressed, her hair was damp. I need to stop by the house to change and then I'm going to the house. You shower, check out and meet me there. We need to start sorting things out, she ordered. No breakfast first, boss, I asked. She grinned at my sarcasm and sternly told me to get my ass up, shower and go home to change, and then we'd talk about breakfast. I really didn't feel like going home alone. I figured I might just change my mind and dump some of Donna's shit in the front yard as a public statement and let her clean it back up herself. I took my time and 2 hours later I pulled up to my house and found June in the bathroom. She was in June's car, parked in the driveway. There was a pickup truck parked outside that I had never seen before. Stepping inside, I found June having coffee with Gary, the officer we had met the night before. You were telling me how Gary, Officer Jensen was helpful. So I wrote down his phone number and called him this morning, offered June by way of explanation. This won't get you in trouble, I asked the young man. He shrugged and said he was off duty and it was his day off. He was sure his captain would be on board, and if not, he was considering a career change anyway. I went to change. Gary, can I have that car that's blocking my access to my garage towed? I asked. He grinned and said it was my house, so I called the tow company and asked them to remove the car. Whoever left it blocking my garage would have to pay towing fees and $40 a day for impound when they picked it up. June called a local firm that offered climate-controlled storage and made a reservation. It wasn't long before most of my clothes and any personal items I didn't want to risk were safely locked up. I even took my linens, towels, bed and dresser from the guest room, as well as my chair and big screen TV. I took the everyday dishes but left Donna her nice china. I didn't fail to clean out the wine cabinet, a small thing, but I wasn't going to leave any of it behind. We still had some time left. Daddy, you need to authorize a few things I did for you. Like transferring half of your money. I used my savings account. It can all be done online, you know that, so I just acted like you. I called your investment broker this morning and told him you were in the process of getting a divorce and asked if you had to come in person or if he could block your account. He said this happens all the time and he can do it. It is very easy to block it. It takes you and your mom together or a court order to unblock it. Are you okay with that? I nodded. She grinned. Good, because that's exactly what I did. I also canceled your credit cards. I claimed they were stolen, but before I did that, I paid off the balance from your bank account. All of your information was on your desk. I know you know better than to leave your book of PIN numbers and passwords behind. I asked what I should do with the money. Well, I left enough money for you to withdraw $400 in cash from the ATM, plus, remember the credit card you gave me just for emergencies while I was in school? Well, you can use it. You and I are on that account. Damn, you're on top of things. Do you have a beef with your mother? Asked Gary. I felt like June's stare was going to make him burn to the ground. No, my mom screwed over my dad so she could mess around. If the situation was reversed and my dad was the one off the reservation, I'd do the same thing to help my mom. I try to be fair. I just won't let her ruin his life when she thinks about it. I have no doubt Mom will try to get the money out. I know my aunt. She will encourage my mom. And once they realize that Daddy's not going to bend over for them, they're going to start taking action. And hard. Before we left the house, the phone rang. It was Donna. Why the hell isn't my credit card working? She demanded. They said it was stolen. You asshole. You're offended that I found a real man and your boyish ego can't deal with it. Well, I'm standing in front of an ATM and on my way to the bank. I'm going to hit up everything I can to get every last dime I can before they close. You're not going to stop me from having a good time this weekend. I knew she would only be able to get about $2,000. June had transferred the rest. She'd have enough money to last her for a few weeks if she didn't spend it on tonight's party. I was willing to bet she'd be the one paying for everyone's fun. You've made your decision, Donna. I've made mine, I said quietly. I'm separating our lives in every way possible until I talk to a lawyer Monday morning. It's over between us. I hung up before she could answer. June and Gary heard this conversation. I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat. I knew I couldn't find an apartment and I didn't want to stay in a hotel for the rest of the weekend. I called my brother and asked if he could put me up for the weekend. "What the hell did you do?" asked Bob. I replied that I hadn't done anything at all. "Don't tell me Donna totally freaked out and dumped your sorry ass or kicked you out for no reason." I told him it was much worse than that. "Well, the guest room is cleaned up. Get your ass in here if you don't want me to come get you. By the way, I hope you brought all the bottles of single-barrel whiskey. Don't leave any so Donna can pour it out." I told him that all the bottles were guarded or accounted for. One I'd already put through my liver and kidneys. "Don't waste any more before you get here. I want you sober enough to explain what happened before you shit your pants." I told him I was taking June out to eat and would be there in a few hours. June smirked. She looked at Gary, who looked dumbfounded. "My uncle and daddy break each other's balls all the time." I mentioned her tongue. "I'm a big girl, daddy. I use more than that. Anyway, Gary, Uncle Bob and Daddy have each other's backs. Their jokes don't mean anything. You can tell it's serious when the jokes are over. I bet their next conversation will be a frank one." After we ate, they followed me to my brother's house and then went about their business. My brother and I spent most of the weekend in long conversations. His wife, Evelyn, listened somewhat at first and after muttering a few remarks like vain self-sufficient bitch left us alone. I wondered when I would hear from Donna next. She didn't call me when she checked her bank balance. Around 5 o'clock on Sunday, my phone rang. "Hi, Donna," I said in as even a voice as I could. "What the hell have you done?" she almost shouted. "Where the hell is Doris's car? I thought you were just pissed off and canceling credit cards trying to stop me from having a good time." "You mean that piece of crap that was blocking access to my garage?" I asked. "I had it towed. I don't know how late they work on Sunday, but their card is on the kitchen table. You'll have to pay towing and impound fees to get your car back. I hope you set aside enough money from the party for that. Your little male ego is so wounded that you had to take it out on my sister?" Donna bellowed. I could hear Doris screaming in the background, calling me all kinds of names. "I told you we'd talk when I got home and I'd tell you how it was going to be. You're going to pay for your little tantrum. You know the car will be repossessed with our money, not hers. First of all, your comment about my little male ego cost you dearly." "I hate that," said I, seething with rage. "Second, I'm not interested in listening to you dictate how things are going to be. You made it clear you were going to mess around, but you found a better man. So as far as I'm concerned, he can have you. Did you seriously think I was going to stay here to listen to you dictate how things were going to be? If you look around, I've moved a lot of personal belongings out of the house. I told you yesterday that I'm separating my life from yours. I'm just going to take my little wounded ego and leave you alone. So if you have something of substance to say, speak up or hang up." I heard her mutter, "It wasn't supposed to be like this." In the background, I heard Doris say, "Tell that weakling to back off. He'll come crawling back soon." I hung up the phone. Surprisingly, I wasn't upset. I felt cold inside, completely frozen. I realized that I would probably mourn the death of my marriage later, but I didn't care now, but I definitely wanted revenge. I half expected her to call me back to curse me out after she looked at the house, but neither Donna nor Doris said a word until the end of the next day. I took the day off to talk to our corporate attorney, who quickly referred me to a divorce lawyer. I was given the usually unhappy news about what happens in a divorce. I would lose half of everything. Fortunately for me, my trust protected my business interests. Donna made about the same income as I did, so alimony wasn't an issue. We had some personal investments, but only about $20,000. We spent almost all of our extra income on sending June to school and bailing Doris out of her financial difficulties. Our main asset was the house, which I would have gladly sold or let Donna buy me out, which I knew she couldn't do without a large loan. We had no dependent children. Doris wasn't considered a dependent. I planned for Donna to be served the next day. Frankly, I thought I wouldn't hear a word from Donna until she was served, at which point it would be vengeful yelling. Around 4 in the afternoon, she called me. "I'd like to talk," she suggested quietly. "So talk," I told her. "Not right now. I'm still at work. You can come home and we can talk in private," she said. "No," I replied laconically. "You can close your office door and talk now, or call me back after you leave. But as for me driving to your house for 2 minutes of conversation or less, it's not worth the effort." "What do you mean 2 minutes? Is that all our marriage is worth?" she asked, perplexed and starting to get angry. "No, he's worth a lot more than that," I replied. "The time for a serious conversation was before you started being promiscuous." I heard her take a deep breath, but interrupted her. "But I'm still willing to talk. I'd like to hear what you have to say, but I know your sister will show up now, start gagging, and I'll be out the door. Or she'll get stupid and try to block my car. That's going to lead to one of 2 things. 1, she'll get towed again. Or I'll smash her window to gain access and release the emergency switch so I can move her out of the way. Then I'll be arrested. She said she will make sure her sister stays away. Another thing that will shorten our conversation is that you'll start saying things I'm not interested in hearing. As soon as you do that, I'll leave. So no, it's not worth the gas or my time to drive home. Same goes for a restaurant or some public place. Call me back when you're in a position to talk." I hung up. I didn't have to wait 15 minutes for her to call me back. I kept an eye on my phone. Our phones were linked by the Find Your Phone app, so I knew she was still in her office. I wondered if she had spent the last few minutes mulling over her approach or consulting with her sister. I didn't care about either. "Hi. I can talk now," she announced when I answered. "So, a few ground rules," said I. Her surprised ground rules made me chuckle. "Yeah, first off, I don't want you wasting my time explaining that this guy you cheated on me with is way more interesting than me. That would only make me angrier. He may have something more, but I don't care. You've never complained or suggested trying something more adventurous before. I'm not sure what that might be, though. We used to experiment with different things a lot. Don't tell me he complimented you and told you how beautiful you were." "I did that. Besides, of course he was sucking up to you. That's what guys do when they want to get in your pants." I heard another sigh. Or perhaps a sigh that told me she was really going to say that. "I also don't want you to start telling me that it was just sex and that you really love me." This time, I heard a whimper. I suspected I was destroying all of her arguments before she even made them. "And I certainly don't want to hear you threaten that if I don't submit to your new world order, your new stallion will take care of you the way you deserve." That was Doris' blunt phrase before you left. If your boy was so rich, why did you need to use credit cards that morning or go to the ATM to get money? Just because that asshole can afford a room at the Marriott and drives a Corvette doesn't mean he's rich. I shuddered. I'd given myself away and shown that I knew too much. I wondered if she'd guessed. She remarked, "How do you know he drives a vet?" she asked. "And Mari?" I interrupted her by saying, and last, but certainly not least, don't tell me that this was your first and only instance of infidelity. The way he greeted both you and your sister shows that he knows you both well. It certainly wasn't your first time with him. I don't care if it was the 2nd or 100th time. "You've been following us?" she exclaimed. "I'm sure you didn't hire a private detective. You had no clue until Friday night. We were so careful." I almost laughed. She'd completely forgotten about that asshole's car. I didn't want it to come back to him. Not yet it didn't. "So after hearing all these rules about what I do not want to hear, what do you say?" She started crying. I let her cry and sipped my beer. Yes, I cold sit and drink beer while my marriage was falling apart. We've been together for 24 years, Donna exclaimed. Isn't that worth keeping? I tried hard not to laugh. It wasn't a happy or cheerful laugh at all. It was a laugh of disbelief. You apparently didn't think it was worth thinking about when you started cheating. She sighed again. I interrupted her. Tell me, did that asshole know you were married? I asked. She hummed. I think so. Well, I'm pretty sure. Well, yeah, he must have from what he said. He was giving me advice. What's the advice? I asked. He told me that if you get upset, I'll tell you how much the divorce will cost you. You'll lose half of everything you own and you'll even have to pay me alimony. Donna said. This asshole is playing the power card, thought I. He said you wouldn't want anyone to know you were a cuckold, that no man wanted it known. He said I'd be in charge and could do whatever I wanted if I played my cards right. Doris told me the same thing. She believes him. According to her, some other women I know have made their husbands obey. They may have shaky marriages, but they don't divorce because it would cost too much. So he knew we were married and didn't care. And you definitely knew we were married and apparently you didn't care either, I said. Now I'm going to ask you about it and then you decide if you have anything to add. What do you think we're going to accomplish by talking right now? She started to cry. I want us to stay together. For us to stay married. You really can't get over your fragile male ego, can you? She wailed. Without a word, I hung up the phone. I mentally berated myself for reacting so quickly. There was something else I wanted to know. Did this asshole pick me? Did he know who I was? Orville Wendell Fontenot III, or Trey as he was known in the company, walked into Bob's office just after lunch the next day, Tuesday. Yes, Mr. Jacobs, you wanted to see me? He asked casually. He was surprised to see me sitting off to the side, but didn't react in any way. Obviously, he didn't realize who I was. I'm sure he knew my identity, but he didn't connect me to the bitch he'd been having fun with all weekend. Trey Fontenot was one of our liaisons and had been with the company for about a year. In some companies, he was known as an opinion leader. He was a salesman of sorts. His job was to make us look good in the press and smooth over any problems with our customers. Not really a salesman, he talked to our customers a lot. His job was easy. We had few, if any, public image problems. His boss dealt mostly with press releases about our developments and organized showings and occasional tours of our facilities. Fontenot's main job was to promote our image. Sometimes he could coordinate with our clients to make sure everyone was on the same page in terms of publicity. I considered it a waste of effort and money. In my opinion, we should have only stood on our own. Now Bob agreed. At least he agreed that continuing to pay Fontenot's salary was a waste of money. Tell me, you weren't in the office on Friday, Bob said. What did you do? And how did you spend the weekend? Trey looked a little puzzled. I spent Friday with a man from Global Medical, Larry Atwell. He came down from New Orleans. We coordinated our publicity efforts, and the rest of the weekend I spent in the company of some ladies. Trey stuttered. May I ask why you're asking? Yes, I heard you were at the Marriott entertaining them. I assume Atwell was still with you. I hope it wasn't at the company's expense and those women weren't prostitutes, stated Bob. No, sir. We did meet with women to have a good time, but it was on a Friday night after our meeting. These women were not paid. Bob asked him what this good time was all about. Well, sir, it's none of your business as it doesn't involve the company, but I will tell you that it's a little hobby of mine to seduce willing women. I ask them out on dates, treat them to wine and dine, and then lure them into my bed for a little fun. These were two women I knew. Everything is completely consensual. How did that occur to you? Bob shook his head. Suffice it to say that's what happened. I want to hear the story. Sit down. Trey started to smirk, relaxing. He obviously thought he had no problems and was even a little proud of his conquests. Well, I'm single now. I got divorced 2 years ago because I like playing the field. I like to seduce women. I get to know them, buy them a drink, dance a little, and if I succeed, invite them to bed. I'm pretty good at it. And it's fun. Nobody gets hurt. The bastard was 32 years old and good-looking. I always thought he was a smarmy bastard. He seemed to have a smirk on his face all the time. Nobody? Asked Bob. How many of those ladies you meet are married? Don't they take care of their marriages? Trey's grin widened. Oh, you're wrong about that. Most of the women I go after are married. They're the best targets. It reduces the risk of constant involvement. We just entertain each other a little. They come in 2 types. It makes them feel alive. Sexy and maybe a little naughty. They do things for me that they say they've never done for their husbands or haven't done since they've been dating. Well, the husband doesn't know, of course. The second type is a little more complicated, but a lot of fun to work with. These are wives who want an upgrade. They want a better lover. Some of them want to improve their financial situation and actually want to leave their husband for a new guy with more money. I drive a red Corvette for a reason. That thing has an attraction. I even have a few different looks. I used to be Lance Sutherland. There's a lumber store in Shreveport by that name. I tell the women that I came here to buy lumber to process and sell to my company. Bob asked him if women really fall for that phrase. Trey laughed. Most don't even give it a second thought. In the bars, they know me as Lance. No last name. But I use a credit card in that name in case I'm addressed that way in a hotel or restaurant. I pay with the card and the women don't pay attention to it. Lately, I've been Lance Parker, the oil man. I make up fake documents and leave them on my hotel room table. I let women see them and think they look important. Then I pick them up with my laptop and put them in my briefcase before the party. The broads have fun while their assholes sit at home waiting for them to come home. Some of the women even think I will take them away to a better life if their husbands leave them. I think even if the husbands find out, most of them forgive their wives after a while. At least no husband has come after me yet. I have a third group of wives who want to get their hubby men to be on guard. You know, obey their wife or lose half their shit. I give these wives all kinds of advice on what to do. They let the asshole know they're up to snuff and don't dare make waves. The funny thing is, the law and the courts are on the wife's side. The husband gets raked over the coals and the wife gets the cream. Like the old Jerry Red song, she got the gold mine and I got the mine. Bob asked him how he meets women. I hang out at a couple clubs where women come to get picked up. It's easy. I'm known as a nice guy who can afford a room at the Marriott. I have a bit of a reputation. I try to behave appropriately. Some women do introduce me to others. Case in point is the woman from this weekend. They are very beautiful. They're a little over 40 and they're both totally hot. I gotta know them, so when Larry came to town, I invited them to join us at the Marriott for the weekend. They gladly accepted. Women love to be lanced. His grin turned into a wide grin. How can you afford to go to the Marriott every weekend? Asked Bob. It must be expensive. That's the beauty of the plan. Trey grinned, almost glad he'd told the story. My cousin is the night manager. He'll block my room early and then, after midnight, change it in the computer to say it's unoccupied. I don't pay a dime. The cleaners come, see that the room needs to be cleaned, and they clean it. No one recognizes anything. This weekend I got a suite, 2 bedrooms, and a living room, all for free. The women thought I was rich. Larry and I entertained them, and they loved it, said Trey. He didn't see me clench my hands into fists. I wanted to get up and punch him so badly. They did all that, and you didn't have to pay them? Asked Bob, seemingly delighted. Did you use alcohol, or were they just whores? Larry and I used to use Viagra. But even then, after a while, you get tired and have to rest. Well, I have a couple concerns about that, as interesting as it is, said Bob. First of all, have you ever harassed any of the women at NSWNC? No, sir, Trey said. My dad taught me from an early age to never litter where I eat. I know we have strict rules of non-brotherhood. So you pick up women in the city. And when you go out of town, do you do anything like that? Asked Bob. I mean, you provide entertainment for Larry Atwell here. Does he reciprocate and do anything like that for you when you go out there? That leads me to ask if any of the other company reps we do business with do the same. I don't want this to backfire on us. Just Larry, Trey said. Global has an apartment for dignitaries, so we pick up women there and use the place. So you pick up women here and there? One more question. Would your expense account pass inspection if we took a close look? Asked Bob. Suddenly Orville Fontenot, aka Trey, aka Lance, became very nervous. Bob smiled and I saw him discreetly press a button on his desk. Now we're going to examine your expense records very carefully. And if we find that you're abusing the system, we're going to take one or both of the following actions. We'll prosecute you for theft or embezzlement or whatever the lawyers call it. But either way, we will take the money out of your last paycheck. Last paycheck? Trey gritted his teeth. You're firing me? For what? For taking whores to a hotel? Yeah, you piece of shit. See, one of those whores you entertained this weekend, Donna, is my ex-wife, said I from my side of the room. And the other one is my sister-in-law. I was glad he hadn't guessed anything. He stared at me for a few brief moments before he muttered, "Oh shit." A couple security guards entered the room as Trey glanced at Bob and then at me. You can't fire me for entertaining your wife, he stated, regaining his footing. It was consensual. It's not my problem. I'll sue you both for wrongful termination. You should study the law. Louisiana is an at-will state. We can fire you for any reason and at any time unless it's something protected by law, like discrimination. And this entertainment with your boss's wife certainly doesn't fall into that category. Now these two gentlemen will escort you to your office to gather your personal belongings. I would advise you to leave before any of the employees find out what a low-life piece of shit you are. Trey changed tactics. Fire me, and I'll tell everyone I entertained your wife. He grinned. Everyone will know they're total whores. Please do it, I begged. It will save me a lot of extra effort. Do you want to be called a cuckoo? He asked incredulously, pausing. I don't want anyone to think I'm being unfair to my wife when I divorce her, replied I. As he was being escorted out, he started yelling loudly that he was being fired for entertaining Jacob's wife. What do you say we leave early, little brother, said Bob with a grin. I feel like having a beer or three. We've got another episode in a couple hours that we need to get ready for. I agreed. I was shaking from the adrenaline rush, but I let Bob lead me out the door. I knew his secretary and the security guys had overheard the entire conversation. Considering that and Trey's rant, everyone in the company would know by the end of the day. It didn't bother me one bit. You know, Trey was yelling about entertaining Jacob's wife. He didn't say which Jacobs. I laughed. Evelyn will be pissed if people think it was her, Bob groaned. Now I really need a beer, he said. Trey better get out of town. We laughed as we walked away. Bob and I were sitting in his living room, sipping beers at 5 o'clock when my phone rang. Showtime, I said. Sitting with us were my daughter, June, and a young police officer named Gary. They seemed to enjoy each other's company and sat side by side on the couch. I realized they were spending quite a bit of time together when Bob's wife, Evelyn, invited June over for Sunday dinner, and she declined, saying she had a date with a man she had just met. She was too busy to meet with me the previous evening as well. I wasn't the least bit surprised when he accompanied her this afternoon and, frankly, fully approved. "You miserable piece of shit," came Donna's voice through the speaker of my phone. "Do you have any idea how humiliated I've been? Do you have any idea what you could have cost me a promotion and even my job? How could you do that? After all our years together? I hope you don't lose your job," I replied, trying to keep a straight face. I'd hate to have to pay alimony to my unemployed ex-wife. But I don't care at all if your promotion is jeopardized. You may have earned it. To be honest, I timed your pitch to coincide with the start of the school board meeting, and I can tell you were deeply humiliated. But why would I do that after our years together? Remember how you mocked me by saying that your whoring and cheating on me hurt my fragile male ego? You even repeated that phrase when we talked yesterday. Well, I hope your fragile female ego took a hit. In the video I saw, it looked exactly like that. Video? She shouted. Of course. My lawyer said I shouldn't be present, so I sent someone to record it. I said, speaking of video, I'm going to send you a videotape of Orville Wendell Fontenot 3, or should I say Turdy, detailing the fact that you and Doris were his whores all weekend. Oh, I forgot. You don't know him by that name. But he did tell Bob and I how he entertained you last weekend. Sounds like he works or rather used to work at East Sink and makes a hobby out of seducing married whores at local pickup centers. Now I would advise you to get an attorney quickly so you can sign and return the divorce papers. I'd hate to send copies of these videos to everyone. Like your parents. They're old. I like them, but there's a limit to how much I won't spare them. I don't want them to think I'm the bad guy in our divorce. You and Doris should make sure of that. Yes, it's part of my nondescript male ego, but I won't be the villain here. I was very honest in the terms I offered. An equal split with no alimony. When you sell the house, you can continue to help your sister financially, at least for a while, until you run out of money. I would suggest you move in together and you will manage the money. I know she gave you bad advice and introduced you to Orville, or Lance as he wants to be called, but you two can still work things out. If you keep your ugly selfishness out of the way, I heard her cry as we passed out. I looked around the room and shrugged. In the video, it took her a while to stop crying after being served. I wonder how long it will take her now. I'll never know. I had already seen the videotape of her being served before I called Donna. She had just finished a meeting with the school board. They were discussing her promotion in the school board system. The videotape showed her coming out smiling, followed by several board members. I suspected it had gone very well in her favor. That expression was replaced by an expression of confusion when a young paperwork clerk approached her and asked if she was Donna Jacobs. When she confirmed that she was handed an envelope and announced that she had received a subpoena. But because she repeated one stupid phrase, I couldn't get over her cheating and needing extra male companionship because of my fragile male ego. I went one step further. A man dressed like an old-time town crier shouted across the foyer and announced in a loud voice, "Listen. Listen up. Donna Jacobs, now known as the cheating whore, has been sentenced." Immediately, two young women standing close to him began to yak on their gazulkas. At first, I thought they were just going to trumpet it, but they started playing a tune that sounded like a wedding song. "Here Comes the Bride." Then all three of them started singing. "Here Comes the Whore. Her marriage is over." They turned and walked out of the auditorium, playing the tune on their gazulkas. The video ended with Donna collapsing to her knees and bursting into tears. No one paid attention to the young police officer who stood off to the side with a cell phone recording what was happening. "Daddy, Gary recorded this for you, but please don't send it," my daughter June pleaded. I begged him not to record it, but he said he promised. He said his word was his bond. I told her that the only person who could see the video from now on would be her mother, unless she fought for a divorce. And Donna, of course, would get a copy of the videotaped interview with Fontenot on her way out. Epilogue: Donna did not resist the divorce. Her attorney told her that my terms were reasonable and in compliance with current divorce law. As expected, she begged to go to counseling to save our marriage. I knew from her angry look when she opened her mouth to say I couldn't get over her actions and forgive her after 20+ years of marriage that she was going to mention my fragile male ego again. Say it. Say fragile male ego once. If I ever hear you or your sister say that phrase, I'm going to send out all the videotapes. Especially to your parents, said I. She stopped talking and stared at me, crying. She hated having to sell the house we owned. It wasn't good enough for her until she was forced to sell it. It was a palace then. I really hoped she wouldn't give too much of the proceeds to pay her sister's bills. June said she would step in and try to prevent that from happening. I didn't care. Orville, aka Trey, aka Lance, had a hard time finding a job even remotely similar to the one he held with us. Perhaps a theft charge due to misuse of an expense account had worsened his chances for the future. Or maybe it was the laughter he heard from the human resources representatives of any potential company when they called to check his employment history. Few of them asked for follow-up explanations. Trey's legal troubles were compounded when the Marriott Hotel Corporation filed charges against him and his cousin for theft of services. I didn't even know it happened, but a night manager has no right to provide rooms, especially for sexual favors. The corporation publicized the situation to make an example of their employees across the country. I heard that the charges were eventually dropped, but only after Orville and his cousin went broke trying to pay a $1,300 an hour lawyer. Global Medical quickly fired and replaced Larry Atwell, a friend of Trey's. He joined Trey in the ranks of the unemployed. I guess someone is keeping an eye on his future career, just like someone here at home is keeping an eye on Trey's career. Of course, I had lost too. My marriage of 24 years was over. It would take me a while to regain my trust in women, but I'd met a few who assured me I could get back in the saddle without much effort. They would help me. They were there to convince me I was wrong to judge women by the two in my family. On the other hand, I no longer had to face a cheating wife and a parasitic daughter-in-law. The only people left to gain in this whole affair are my daughter June and future son-in-law Gary, a former police officer and my current protege. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next